Have you ever felt like your life was on a path you never chose? Like you were just a passenger, watching the scenery of your own existence blur by? I know that feeling. My name, well, you'll learn that in time, but my story begins in a place of quiet loneliness, in the shadow of a great and terrible mistake. This wasn't the world you think you know. It was the ultimate universe, a place of sharper edges, harsher consequences, where familiar faces wore unfamiliar scars. And at the center of it all was a boy, a 15-year-old kid named Peter Parker. Imagine him, not a legendary hero, not yet, just a bookish kid with his nose in a textbook, his mind a million miles away from the school bullies, dreaming of a brilliant future and a girl with red hair named Mary Jane. His anchor in the storm was his Uncle Ben. With his parents gone, Ben and Aunt May were his whole world. Ben saw the greatness in Peter, even when Peter couldn't see it in himself. And then there was his friend, Harry Osborn, the richest kid in school, son of the imperious Norman Osborn. One night, while studying at Peter's house, Harry saw a complex formula on a board, a legacy from Peter's father, Richard Parker, a secret wrapped in a mystery. Neither of them knew it then, but that formula was a ghost, and it was about to haunt them all. The next day, a field trip to Osborne Industries. It was supposed to be boring. It was anything but. In a sealed lab, an experiment went wrong. A genetically altered spider, vibrant and dangerous, escaped its container. And in a chaotic moment, it found the hand of Peter Parker. The bite was like fire and ice. He collapsed. The world spun. They called it an allergic reaction. They had no idea. They sent him home, a confused and feverish boy, while in another part of the building, Norman Osborn watched security footage. He had seen the spider bite the Parker boy. He had a suspicion, a terrible, wonderful suspicion, and he ordered his head scientist, a man named Otto Octavius, to find out everything about Peter Parker. Back home, Peter's world began to shift. He didn't just feel better, he felt more. He accidentally crushed a door handle. He moved with a speed that startled even him. Strength hummed in his veins, and with it came an ego, a cocky, dangerous certainty. When a bully pushed him, Peter pushed back and sent the boy to the hospital. The bill was massive. The disappointment in Uncle Ben's eyes was worse. Desperate and arrogant, Peter thought he saw a way out. He had these powers, why not use them? Why not get paid? He found a seedy underground wrestling ring, put on a mask to hide his age, and called himself something. It wasn't Spider-Man yet, it was just a disguise. And he won. He kept winning. The money felt good. The power felt even better. But in a dark lab at Oscorp, Otto Octavius was reverse engineering the miracle. Using Peter's blood, he and Osborn believed they had perfected the formula that created him. Norman, hungry for that power, demanded to be the test subject. But Otto changed something. He tampered with the serum. Perhaps it was ambition. Perhaps it was malice. The result was a cataclysm. The lab exploded in a wave of energy and fire. Otto Octavius was gravely injured, left for dead, and Norman Osborn vanished. Peter, meanwhile, sewed himself a proper costume, red and blue. It felt right. He was invincible. He was winning, and that arrogance led him to the single most pivotal moment of his life. Walking home one night, he saw a man flee a deli, cash in hand. The owner shouted for help. Peter, in his street clothes, watched. He had the power to stop it. He could have webbed the man's feet, tripped him, anything. But he thought, not my problem. He let the thief run right past him into the night. He told the deli owner to call the police. It wasn't his responsibility. He arrived home to a confrontation. Uncle Ben and Aunt May had seen his slipping grades, his late nights, and argument erupted. Peter, filled with teenage rage and ungrateful pride, stormed out. He went to a party, lost in his own resentment. But the night was about to turn to ash.
When he finally slunk back home, the street was lit by the cold, rotating red and blue of police cars. His heart stopped. Inside, he found Aunt May sobbing. Uncle Ben was gone, shot by a burglar, a man who had broken into their home, demanded money, and when Ben laughed that he had more than they did, the gun fired. A grief, sharp and sickening, twisted in Peter's gut, but beneath it was a colder, more terrifying feeling, a sense of dreadful familiarity. The police had a description. Peter's mind raced. He knew that description. He had seen that man's face just hours before, running from the deli. In that moment, the walls of his world crumbled. His arrogance evaporated, leaving only a hollow, howling guilt. If he'd acted, if he had just done the right thing, the words Uncle Ben had spoken to him about his father echoed now, not as a lecture, but as a condemnation. Great things are going to happen in your life, Peter. Great things, and with that will come great responsibility. He understood the great power part. He'd been reveling in it. He'd utterly, catastrophically failed to understand the responsibility. Tears burning his eyes, he looked at the mask he'd made for fighting and making money. It was a symbol of his failure. But maybe it could become something else, a symbol of penance, a tool for justice, a way to ensure no one else would feel this pain because he stood by and did nothing. He whispered to the empty room, the weight of his uncle's legacy finally settling on his shoulders. I do now. He put on the mask. He slipped out into the night. He was not a wrestler. He was not a performer. He was a hunter. And he found his quarry in a dank warehouse, cornered by the police. With a strength fueled by grief and fury, he webbed the man up, pinned him down, and stared into the face of the man whose freedom cost Ben Parker his life. He didn't kill him. He wanted to. The rage screamed for it, but Ben's words were a chain, holding him back. With great power comes great responsibility. Justice, not vengeance. He left the man for the police, a note attached, from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He swung into the cold night, a hero born from the worst moment of his life. He saved a child from a burning building. He stopped a mugging. He was clumsy. He was scared, but he was trying. And when he returned home at dawn, exhausted and soul-weary, Mary Jane was there. She saw the pain in his eyes, the tears he could no longer hold back. She didn't ask questions. She just held him as he finally broke down. But as the sun rose on a new day for Peter Parker, a different kind of monster was waking up. In the wreckage of Oscorp, something stirred in the river. And in a classified government medical facility, a man fused to 4 mechanical arms began to dream violent, angry dreams. Peter Parker had taken his first step, but the world, it seemed, was already preparing to test just how responsible he could be, and just how much he would have to lose.
A hero's first day is never quiet. For me, it was the deafening silence of my own home without Uncle Ben's voice. I filled it with the sounds of the city, the thwip of my web shooters, the grunts of surprised thugs, the grateful, if confused, thanks of people I helped. I built the web shooters myself, using my father's formula for a molecular adhesive. It was a piece of him, a piece of Ben, and my own ingenuity, all fused into the tools of my new life. It felt right. But the world wasn't ready for a man in a mask, especially not J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle. He saw a vigilante, a menace, a circus freak in tights. He plastered my image across the front page with headlines that stung. So I did the only logical thing. I walked into the Bugle with photos of myself. I figured if someone was going to profit from Spider-Man, it might as well be Peter Parker. Jonah's bluster bought me a job and a lifeline of cash for Aunt May. A secret victory, but a victory all the same. Life became a precarious balancing act. School, work, and the exhausting, exhilarating nights spent patrolling. I confided in Mary Jane.
The look on her face, the shock, the disbelief, then the dawning awe was a memory I'd cling to in the dark times ahead. She became my anchor in the normal world, the one person who knew the weight I carried. Then the balance shattered. I was at school when my new spider sense, a tingling, psychic alarm in the back of my skull, screamed a warning. A second later, the wall of my chemistry class exploded. Fire and smoke poured into the hall. Through the chaos, I heard Harry Osborn's voice, raw with terror, screaming, "Help me! He's here!" I didn't have time to think. In a blur of motion, I became Spider-Man in a janitor's closet and swung into the burning hallway. Students were running, crying, and in the center of it all stood a monster. Huge, clad in a torn purple cloak, eyes glowing with an inner hellish fire. "Hall monitor," I cracked, my voice shaky behind the mask. "I'm gonna have to ask for your hall pass." His response was a fireball hurled with enough force to crater the lockers. The fight was a nightmare ballet. I bounced off walls, dodging blasts, joking from sheer mind-numbing terror. He was silent, horrifyingly silent, until he caught me. His massive hand squeezed my throat, lifting me into the sky over the city. I couldn't breathe. The streets below were a dizzying mosaic of certain death. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. Not with a bang, but with a crush. But then I remembered my webbing. In a desperate, wild gamble, I fired strands at two opposing buildings, creating a giant slingshot-like trampoline. The web line caught, stretched, and spoing, catapulted me back into the sky with a force that stole what little breath I had left. I cheered, a raw, wild sound of survival. I landed on the creature's back, my fists striking hard. He roared, finally breaking his silence, and threw me down. That's when I saw it. As his cloak tore, the face beneath wasn't human. It was green, grotesque, with wide, grinning teeth and eyes full of madness, and it growled a single, impossible word. "Parker." My blood went cold. How? How could it know? The battle raged onto the streets, then into the sky, a helicopter joining the fray. The goblin, for that's what he was, turned his fury on the innocent people in that aircraft. I swung between them, a human shield, shouting for him to stop. That's when the police opened fire. Bullets riddled the creature's chest. He staggered, looked at his own blood, then at me with pure, undiluted hatred. "Parker!" he shrieked again, and lunged. I dodged. He missed, and he plummeted like a stone into the cold waters of the bay. I begged the police to save him, but they just turned their guns on me. I had to run, my mind reeling. Back at school, posing as a dazed survivor, I found Mary Jane and a shell-shocked Harry. Harry's next words changed everything. His voice was a hollow whisper. "It was my father. That thing, that was my father. Norman's alive, and he's trying to kill me." The floor dropped out from under me. Norman Osborn, my best friend's father, the man whose spider bit me. He was the monster, and he knew my name. That night, as I tried to process it all, the news showed a bank robbery. The thief used electrical powers. They called him the Shocker. I suited up, stopped him easily, but the next day, the real horror began. Jonah's paper offered money for pictures of Spider-Man, my own photos. It was a sustainable, if insane, idea, but a darker thought followed. If my photo could sell papers, what else could my presence attract? The answer came from the shadows, a man named Wilson Fisk, the king of crime. My search for Uncle Ben's killer led me to him, a mountain of a man who operated from a penthouse of legitimate business, his hands seemingly clean. I broke into his office. A foolish, brave, stupid move. I was outmatched, outgunned. His enforcers, Ox, Fancy Dan, Montana, and a living weapon named Electro almost ended me there. I was unmasked, electrocuted, and thrown from a skyscraper. I survived by a thread, clinging to a window ledge. I had been arrogant again, and this time Kingpin made his point brutally clear. The next morning, a body was found floating in the river, a crime lord who had crossed Fisk, and the corpse was wearing my mask. The city now believed Spider-Man was a murderer. Kingpin had framed me, and I had handed him the blueprint by invading his home. My quest for personal vengeance had unleashed a tidal wave of consequences. I was a hero to no one. I was a fugitive, a menace, a wanted man. And as I stared at that horrific headline, a chilling realization settled in my gut. This was just the beginning. Norman Osborn knew my name. Wilson Fisk wanted me dead. And somewhere in the city, a brilliant, broken man named Octo Octavius was waking up in a government lab, fused to 4 mechanical arms, whispering a single name in his newfound rage, the name of the man he blamed for his torment. The walls were closing in, and the worst part? I had built most of them myself.
The mask was no longer a disguise. It was a target. Every siren was for me. Every glance on the street felt like an accusation. Kingpin's frame-up was perfect. The police had their monster, and the public had their fear. I had to clear my name, but I was trapped. I couldn't go to the police. I couldn't tell Aunt May. The only person I had was Mary Jane, and every time I saw the worry in her eyes, I felt the weight of dragging her deeper into my nightmare. It was Mary Jane who gave me the key. We were studying, or pretending to, when she pointed at a news report about Nixon. Why would a paranoid man record everything, she'd asked, not knowing her words were a lightning bolt. Because he thought he was untouchable. Kingpin, in his towering fortress of arrogance, he would have records, security feeds, proof of what really happened in his office that night, proof of his crime, not mine. It was a desperate, insane plan. Break into the lion's den again. The night of the infiltration was a symphony of tension. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I slipped into the building's underbelly, disabled a guard, and reached the security servers. My fingers, sticky with sweat, cycled through the disks. I found the date. The proof was in my hands, a digital confession of Kingpin's murder. Then the lights went out. My spider sense screamed a fraction of a second before the first bolt of electricity seared the air where my head had been. They were waiting. Electro, Montana, Ox, the whole crew. The fight in the dark server room was chaos, a blur of whips, crushing fists, and blinding arcs of power. I webbed, I dodged, I used their strength against them. I kicked a pipe, flooding the room, and Electro's own power short-circuited back into him. He fell, crackling and smoking. For a moment, I felt a surge of triumph. I'd done it! Then, the door behind me groaned on its hinges. Not a door, a wall of shadow and muscle. Wilson Fisk filled the doorway, his voice a low tremor that shook the very floor. "There is no way you are leaving here alive." Terror is a cold liquid in the veins, but sometimes it boils over into something else. Madness. I faced the kingpin of crime and decided to mock a giant. "You're so fat," I heard myself say, the words tumbling out on a wave of adrenaline-fueled insanity, "that when you cut yourself shaving, marshmallow fluff comes out." The confusion on his face was almost worth it. Almost. He charged. I danced, webbed his arms to the wall, webbed his face for good measure, and with the discs clutched to my chest, I vanished into the night, leaving the most powerful man in the city's underworld blind and roaring in a prison of my making. The next day, the Daily Bugle exploded, not with stories about me, but with Ben Urich's expose on Wilson Fisk. The security footage, delivered anonymously, was the smoking gun.
Kingpin's empire of respectability crumbled in a single news cycle. I watched it from my bedroom, a fragile, hopeful feeling stirring in my chest. I had won, not with fists, but with truth. The victory was sweet, but short-lived. It opened a door I hadn't meant to open. Mary Jane's curiosity had become a constant, gentle pressure. Where do you go? What are you hiding? The lies were building a wall between us. So one afternoon, with my heart in my throat, I told her, "I'm Spider-Man." She laughed. She laughed so hard she fell off the bed. I had to show her, scampering up the wall, hanging from the ceiling. Her laughter died in her throat, replaced by a scream of pure shock. Aunt May shouted from downstairs, and in the chaotic, hushed explanation that followed, I saw Mary Jane's world reshape itself around this impossible truth. There was fear there, yes, but also a fierce, protective light. I had an ally, a real one. But my life has a rhythm. For every moment of light, a shadow answers. In a classified medical facility, Dr. Octo Octavius awoke. Bandages were removed. He saw the 4 sleek metallic arms fused to his spine, responding to his thoughts as if they were his own. The doctors called it a breakthrough. Octo called it a mutilation. And as a wave of rage and betrayal washed over him, a single metallic arm lashed out on its own, piercing a doctor's chest. The man who would become Doc Ock had arrived, and his first thought was not of science, but of vengeance against the man he believed had done this to him, Norman Osborn. And Norman, he was closer than any of us knew. He hadn't drowned in the bay. He was regrouping, planning. He had been watching me, studying me. He saw the news reports, the fights, the growing legend of Spider-Man. His greatest...
The mask was no longer a disguise. It was a target. Every siren was for me. Every glance on the street felt like an accusation. Kingpin's frame-up was perfect. The police had their monster, and the public had their fear. I had to clear my name, but I was trapped. I couldn't go to the police. I couldn't tell Aunt May. The only person I had was Mary Jane, and every time I saw the worry in her eyes, I felt the weight of dragging her deeper into my nightmare. It was Mary Jane who gave me the key. We were studying, or pretending to, when she pointed at a news report about Nixon. Why would a paranoid man record everything, she'd asked, not knowing her words were a lightning bolt. Because he thought he was untouchable. Kingpin, in his towering fortress of arrogance, he would have records, security feeds, proof of what really happened in his office that night, proof of his crime, not mine. It was a desperate, insane plan. Break into the lion's den, again. The night of the infiltration was a symphony of tension. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I slipped into the building's underbelly, disabled a guard, and reached the security servers. My fingers, sticky with sweat, cycled through the disks. I found the date. The proof was in my hands, a digital confession of Kingpin's murder. Then, the lights went out. My spider sense screamed a fraction of a second before the first bolt of electricity seared the air where my head had been. They were waiting. Electro, Montana, Ox, the whole crew. The fight in the dark server room was chaos, a blur of whips, crushing fists, and blinding arcs of power. I webbed, I dodged, I used their strength against them. I kicked a pipe, flooding the room, and Electro's own power short-circuited back into him. He fell, crackling and smoking. For a moment, I felt a surge of triumph. I'd done it! Then, the door behind me groaned on its hinges. Not a door, a wall of shadow and muscle. Wilson Fisk filled the doorway, his voice a low tremor that shook the very floor. "There is no way you are leaving here alive." Terror is a cold liquid in the veins, but sometimes it boils over into something else. Madness. I faced the kingpin of crime and decided to mock a giant. "You're so fat," I heard myself say, the words tumbling out on a wave of adrenaline-fueled insanity, "that when you cut yourself shaving, marshmallow fluff comes out." The confusion on his face was almost worth it. Almost. He charged. I danced.
webbed his arms to the wall, webbed his face for good measure, and with the discs clutched to my chest, I vanished into the night, leaving the most powerful man in the city's underworld blind and roaring in a prison of my making. The next day, the Daily Bugle exploded, not with stories about me, but with Ben Urich's expose on Wilson Fisk. The security footage, delivered anonymously, was the smoking gun. Kingpin's empire of respectability crumbled in a single news cycle. I watched it from my bedroom, a fragile, hopeful feeling stirring in my chest. I had won, not with fists, but with truth. The victory was sweet, but short-lived. It opened a door I hadn't meant to open. Mary Jane's curiosity had become a constant, gentle pressure. Where do you go? What are you hiding? The lies were building a wall between us. So one afternoon, with my heart in my throat, I told her, "I'm Spider-Man." She laughed. She laughed so hard she fell off the bed. I had to show her, scampering up the wall, hanging from the ceiling. Her laughter died in her throat, replaced by a scream of pure shock. Aunt May shouted from downstairs, and in the chaotic, hushed explanation that followed, I saw Mary Jane's world reshape itself around this impossible truth. There was fear there, yes, but also a fierce, protective light. I had an ally, a real one. But my life has a rhythm. For every moment of light, a shadow answers. In a classified medical facility, Dr. Octo Octavius awoke. Bandages were removed. He saw the 4 sleek metallic arms fused to his spine, responding to his thoughts as if they were his own. The doctors called it a breakthrough. Octo called it a mutilation. And as a wave of rage and betrayal washed over him, a single metallic arm lashed out on its own, piercing a doctor's chest. The man who would become Doc Ock had arrived, and his first thought was not of science, but of vengeance against the man he believed had done this to him, Norman Osborn. And Norman, he was closer than any of us knew. He hadn't drowned in the bay. He was regrouping, planning. He had been watching me, studying me. He saw the news reports, the fights, the growing legend of Spider-Man, his greatest creation, his property. He reached out, not with a threat, but with an invitation, a dinner at the Osborn penthouse. Harry delivered it, smiling, back to school and seemingly healed. Norman Osborn's words echoed in the silent spaces of my mind, a poison that tainted every thought. "I will start with Aunt May." He didn't just know my secret, he held a knife to the heart of my world. I was trapped, a puppet with my strings woven around the throats of everyone I loved. I tried to warn May. When another limousine arrived the next day, I begged her not to go to dinner at the Osborns. She saw the raw fear in my eyes, the kind a boy shouldn't have to show his guardian. She listened. She sent the limo away. It was a small victory, but it felt like holding back the tide with my hands. That night, as I swung through the city's canyon, a desperate plan forming, I saw him, a grin of sharp teeth etched against the moonlit skyline, the Goblin. "I thought I told you to throw the costume away," he snarled. The rage I'd been swallowing erupted. "What did I ever do to you? This is your fault, your spider, your mess." He just laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "Soon you will learn. You owe me everything." And then he was gone, a green streak vanishing into the urban night. But he wasn't finished. As I watched from a gargoyle's perch, despairing, I saw a limo pull up below. Harry was helping someone out. My breath caught. Mary Jane! The Goblin's earlier threat flashed in my mind a second before he moved. A green blur shot down from the rooftops, snatched Mary Jane like a hawk taking a sparrow, and vanished with her into the sky. Pure, unthinking terror took over. I screamed into the night, "Someone help! Nick! Shield! Anyone!" and launched myself after them. I was faster than fear, propelled by a love that felt like it was tearing me apart. He landed on a bridge, Mary Jane struggling in his grip. Her eyes found mine, wide with terror. "Peter!" "I'll do anything," I screamed at the monster. "Just let her go." The goblin's smile was the last thing I saw before he opened his hand. Mary Jane fell. The world stopped. There was no thought, only instinct. I leaped after her, the wind screaming in my ears. My web shooter fired, the strand catching her ankle. I pulled, the momentum whipping us in a terrifying arc, but I held on. We crashed onto the bridge in a tangle of limbs and relief. But the battle wasn't ours. Shield helicopters swarmed in, plasma cannons blazing. They hammered the goblin with a fury that shook the city. He kneeled, smoking, and looked up. I saw hatred there, but also a strange, triumphant recognition. "It's gonna take more than that," he growled, not to the soldiers, but to someone watching, to Nick Fury. He fired a blast, deflected by a shimmering energy shield from a helicopter. New technology, a bigger game was being played, and I was just a piece on the board. I had to get Mary Jane to safety. I stopped a cab, shoved her inside, and told the driver to go. Her safety was the only thing that mattered. Then I turned back to the goblin. Rage, clean and hot, replaced the terror. This ended now. We fought across the bridge, a brutal exchange of strength and fire. I got in close, my fists cracking against that green hide, screaming that he would never hurt anyone again. But his hand found my throat, squeezing, lifting me high. "You will be mine," he rasped. Then a gunshot, not from Shield, from the bridge. The goblin flinched, his grip loosening. I looked down. Harry Osborn stood there, a smoking pistol in his hand, his face a mask of horror and resolve. He had shot his own father. The serum's hold broke. Norman Osborn, just a man again, bleeding and broken, collapsed. Shield troops stormed in. Nick Fury himself appeared, a monolith of cool authority. He explained things I didn't want to understand. Norman was a rogue asset, a failed experiment. My life, my powers were all part of a shadow war I never enlisted in. Enjoy your youth while it lasts. The day you turn 18, you're mine. I found Mary Jane in our old warehouse hideaway. She was shaking, but alive. I held her, and for a moment the storm was outside. But as we sat in the dark, I knew the truth. Norman was in a cryocell. Octo Octavius was in a prison, but the shadows they cast were long, and they were stretching towards me, from my past and from a legacy I had yet to fully uncover.
For a brief, shining moment, there was peace. Or something like it. No goblins, no octopi, no kingpins. Just school, homework, and the delicate, wonderful normalcy of holding Mary Jane's hand. I even managed to get a new, proper suit sewn. Life, for a heartbeat, felt within my control. Then the world broke again. This time, it wasn't a monster from a lab. It was a ghost from my own bloodline. Aunt May, in a fit of spring cleaning, pulled a box from a hidden alcove in the basement. Inside were relics of a life I'd only glimpsed in faded photographs. My parents, and among them, a videotape. The images that flickered to life were a punch to the heart. A picnic. My father, Richard Parker, smiling, alive. Next to him another man, his partner, Edward Brock, and a boy a few years older than me, Eddie. We played together as children. Aunt May's face was solemn. "We were waiting until you were older," she said. "Eddie moved away after the accident, but maybe you should find him. Maybe he has answers." The internet is a powerful thing. I found an Eddie Brock Jr., a college student studying astrophysics. We met. The connection was instant, a shared loss that bridged the years. He was intense, brilliant, driven by the same ghost that drove me, a father's unfinished work. He took me to his lab, his eyes gleaming with a fanatical light. "This," he whispered, holding up a beaker of swirling black liquid, "is our inheritance." The suit. My father and Edward Brock Sr.'s life work, a biosynthetic cure for cancer designed to bond with a host's DNA to heal. But their funding came from a corporation, Trask Industries, which owned everything. They died fighting to reclaim their legacy.
This black goo was the secret stolen prototype. Eddie's voice was reverent. Our fathers were giants, Peter. They were cheated. A dangerous idea took root in my mind. Finish what he started. It was arrogant. It was foolish. It was a son's desperate need to touch the hand of a father he never knew. That night, I snuck back into Eddie's lab. My hands trembled as I extracted a sample of the black liquid, and in my fumbling, I spilled it. The substance moved with a mind of its own. It crawled over my skin, a living shadow, enveloping me in a cold, clinging embrace. I panicked, tried to pull it off, but it was merging, bonding. When it settled, I was clad in a suit of living, pulsating black. It was stronger than my old suit, faster. It generated its own webbing from my will. It was perfect. And it was alive. I felt its hunger, its anger. It whispered in the back of my skull, a voice that was mine and yet not. My first test was stopping a kidnapping. The suit took bullets and repaired itself. I was invincible. But after the fight, hunting down a common thief in an alley, the suit's whispers became screams. The thief's face morphed in my mind's eye. He became the man who shot Uncle Ben. A red haze of vengeance clouded my vision. The suit grew fangs, a whip-like tongue. My voice deepened, became a guttural roar. He deserves to live. I was strangling him. I was going to kill him. And a part of me, a terrifying, dark part, wanted to. At the last second, I tore the suit away, ripping it from my own body with a scream of pure terror. I had almost become a murderer. The suit wasn't a tool. It was a cancer. I went back to Eddie, the beaker in my hand, ready to destroy it. He saw the suit's residue on me. His awe turned to fury. "You're Spider-Man." It wasn't a question. I pleaded with him. "This thing, it's evil. It has to be destroyed." We argued, two sons fighting over their father's dangerous ghost. In the end, he relented. I took the beaker to a power plant, intending to incinerate the horror for good. But Eddie's obsession ran deeper than I knew. He returned to the lab after I left. He had a second sample. While I was trying to destroy our father's nightmare, he was embracing it. He poured the black liquid onto his own hand. The transformation was not a bonding. It was a consumption. The suit, Venom, didn't find a worthy host in Eddie Brock. It found a vessel of rage and resentment. It consumed him, mind and body. When a janitor entered the lab, curious about the groaning sounds, she found not a man, but a shapeless, hungry black maw. And it was very, very hungry. The next day at school, rain lashed the windows. My spider sense shrieked a warning I didn't understand. I looked outside. In a flash of lightning, I saw it, a monstrous black silhouette with a wide white grin pressed against the glass, staring right at me. Eddie's voice, distorted and dripping with malice, slithered through the rain. "You shouldn't have lied, Peter." He was here. The suit was here, and it wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a monster wearing my best friend's face, and it had come for a family reunion. The rain fell in icy sheets, but the cold in my veins was deeper. Eddie Brock, or what was left of him, stood before me, a towering mass of sinewy black symbiote, his face a grotesque parody of Spider-Man's mask, with a giant, jagged white grin and hollow eyes. "Our fathers died to create this." The voice was a distorted roar, layered with Eddie's fury and the symbiote's hunger. "Now you will too." This wasn't a fight against a villain. It was a tragedy playing out with fists and fangs. I begged him to fight it, to remember who he was, as his black tendrils lashed out, slamming me into the wet concrete of the school parking lot. The suit made him stronger than me, angrier, utterly relentless. I was defending. He was trying to devour. I led him away, a frantic chase across rooftops and power lines, trying to minimize the carnage. We crashed onto the streets, a tangle of limbs and violence. I saw flashes of the boy I'd shared a picnic with, buried beneath the monster's rage. "Eddie, please!" I webbed his face, trying to contain him. "We need you!" he screamed, and the suit surged, engulfing me. Darkness, a cold, suffocating embrace. I felt its mind, a bottomless hunger, Eddie's jealous rage, and a twisted, possessive love for me, its first host. It wanted to absorb us, to make us one. In that terrifying silence, I found a kernel of pure will. No! I tore myself free, bursting from the black mass with a gasp. A nearby tire iron became my weapon. I swung it with all my strength, shattering the symbiote's formed face. Eddie screamed, a sound of pure agony, and stumbled back, directly onto a live power line. The electrical explosion was blinding. When the light faded, all that remained was a smoldering, bubbling puddle of black ooze. The police shouted. I crawled up a wall and escaped, leaving behind the ashes of a friendship and a haunting question. Had I just killed my only link to my father? I went to Nick Fury, desperate. "Take these powers back. I don't want them anymore." He refused, cold as steel. "You had a rough day. Did what you did make someone's life better? The answer is yes. Stop whining." He saw me not as a person, but as a future asset, a soldier in his coming genetic war. I was trapped in a game with rules I never agreed to. The aftermath was a hollow silence. I was costumeless, haunted. Mary Jane, in a beautiful act of faith, began sewing me a new one, but another shadow lengthened. Gwen Stacy, the police captain's daughter staying with us after her mother left, was drowning in grief and suspicion. She blamed Spider-Man for all the city's ills. The tension in our house was a taut wire. And then the final legacy of my father's work resurfaced in the most horrific way. Dr. Kurt Connors, the man I'd saved from his lizard transformation, had taken my blood sample. Obsessed with its regenerative properties, he'd spliced it, experimented, trying to play God. He created something, a rejuvenating organism. It escaped. It wasn't a monster from a lab. It was a red, shambling thing, a primal scream given form. It fed on life energy, leaving husks behind, and it had my face, my genetic blueprint. Connors, in his horror, called it the Carnage symbiote. The creature found our home. It found Gwen in the backyard. I arrived too late. I saw the tendril retract, saw Gwen's lifeless body fall to the grass. Aunt May's scream from the window will echo in my soul. My father's science, my blood, had killed an innocent girl. The hunt was a blur of rage and grief. I tracked the red monster, fought it through the city, a mirror of myself reflected in a funhouse of horror. In the end, I used its own hunger against it, luring it into the searing heat of a factory smokestack. It let go, consumed by the flames. I stood, watching the fire, feeling nothing but ash inside. I confronted Connors. The brilliant, broken man didn't fight back. "You killed her," he whispered, absorbing the blame. He turned himself in. The nightmare born from Parker blood was over. But as I sat in the Watsons' living room later, Mary Jane sleeping fitfully beside me, I stared out at the night. A legacy of power, a legacy of monsters, a legacy of death. The threads of my life were not my own. They were spun by my father, by Osborne, by fate, into a web I couldn't escape. And at that moment, feeling more alone than ever, I had no idea that the greatest betrayal was not waiting in a lab or a penthouse. It was growing in a secret facility, shaped in my own image, learning to smile my smile, and preparing to take everything I had left.
The world moved on. The city patched its wounds.
I patched mine with Mary Jane's love and the steadfast, if weary, support of Aunt May. I even found a new balance, training with Captain America, learning that power without discipline is just chaos. For a few precious months, the shadows receded. They were gathering, of course. In the deepest vaults of the Triskelion, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s prison for the genetically extraordinary, a toxic family reunion was taking place. Norman Osborn in cryosleep, Otto Octavius plotting, Electro, Sandman, Craven the Hunter. Guarded by Hank Pym, they were supposed to be rehabilitated. Norman's mind, even frozen, was a furnace. He whispered to Otto through the walls, a psychic poison of resentment. He promised a reckoning. He promised Peter. The breakout was not an escape, it was an eruption. Otto, playing the model prisoner, was given access to his own mechanical arms. He used them to slaughter his guards and free the others. Norman, thawed and furious, embraced the goblin. Electro, Sandman, Craven, they were a hurricane of pent-up power unleashed upon their captors. 35 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents died in minutes. The most dangerous minds I had ever faced were loose, united by one name, Parker. Nick Fury came for me at school. His face was granite. They've escaped, all of them, and Osborn's first move will be for you. He had agents on May and Mary Jane. I was drafted. There was no choice. The villain's play was masterful, brutal. They didn't come for me with fists. They went after the White House. Norman, in a twisted performance, gave a televised interview, painting himself as Fury's victim, a martyr of government overreach. He demanded $100 million, his company back, and Fury's head. The president panicked. Fury's time was running out. Then the ultimate power play. The Sinister Six attacked the Triskelion itself. Max Dillon's electricity shorted out the base. Flint Marco's sand blinded and choked. Otto's arms tore through steel. And Norman found me. He didn't want to fight me. He wanted to recruit me. "They are victims like us," he hissed, holding me in a cell, the others arrayed behind him. "Fury did this. Join us. Make history." I refused. He just smiled. "Aunt May will die tonight. Then Mary Jane, I will unmake you." They dragged me to Washington. I was their prisoner, their unwilling mascot. On the lawn of the White House, as Norman demanded his ransom, the cavalry arrived. Not the police, the ultimates. Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Wasp, Giant Man. The sky filled with the roar of the helicarrier. Chaos, a war on the front lawn. I was frozen, a gun in my hand, Norman's threat echoing. Captain America fought his way to me. "Fight, soldier." "I have May," I screamed. "She's on the helicarrier," Cap shouted. "We have her. Now move." That was all I needed. The shackles of fear broke. I turned and slammed my fist into the goblin's face with every ounce of strength I had. "I'm sick of you in my life." The battle was apocalyptic. Iron Man dueled Sandman with sonic repulsors. Thor's lightning cleaved the sky. Wasp shrank and disrupted Otto's systems. And in the midst of it, a new player arrived, Harry Osborn. He stood before his transformed father, a small figure against a giant, pleading, "Dad, stop this, please." For a second, I saw the monster hesitate. I saw Norman Osborn in the goblin's eyes. Then a S.H.I.E.L.D. sniper, following orders, fired a genetic stabilizing round. It hit Norman in the back. He screamed, not in pain, but in betrayal, as his body began to revert. "I'll kill you all!" He looked at Harry, his son who had come to save him, and his final words were a curse. "All of you! I'll kill all of you for this!" They took him away, frozen again. Harry was let off, broken. Fury looked at me. "It's over." But as I rode back on the helicarrier, finding Aunt May safe and angry, I knew it wasn't over. It was a stalemate. I had survived the 6, but survival has a cost, and my account was running dangerously low. The calm after the storm was the most fragile peace I'd ever known. Aunt May, knowing the truth now, watched me with new, worried eyes. Mary Jane held my hand tighter. We were together, but a chill had settled in our home, the chill of known threats and endings foreshadowed. Norman Osborn, imprisoned in a new, deeper cell, had one card left to play. His mind, a twisted thing of ozone and genius, focused on a single goal: legacy. His son had failed him, his empire was ashes, but his greatest creation, me, still lived. That was an insult he could not abide. He began to whisper, not to guards, but to the unstable chemistry of his own body. He focused the Oz formula, not on transformation, but on combustion. He would not break out, he would burn out. The explosion at the Triskelion was not an escape attempt, it was a declaration of war. It blew a hole through levels of concrete and steel, and in the chaos, other cells failed. Electro, Sandman, Craven, and the clone of Gwen Stacy, the red monster born of carnage, all slithered into the night. Norman emerged, not as Goblin, but as a being of pure, smoldering energy, his mind singular. Find Peter Parker, crucify Nick Fury. He went on television. He played the victim flawlessly. The public, ever hungry for a scandal, began to listen. The narrative shifted. Spider-Man was the dangerous government weapon. Norman Osborn was a wronged pioneer. The target on my back glowed white-hot. Fury, replaced by Carol Danvers, tried to protect me by throwing me in a cell as bait. It didn't work. My friends, Johnny Storm and Bobby Drake, were staying at my house when Norman and his freed allies came calling. The fight was brutal, short. They overwhelmed the two heroes. They were waiting for me. I came home to a war zone. My street was a battleground. I fought Electro, Sandman, and Vulture with everything I had, but I was one against many, still aching from old wounds. They beat me down on my own front lawn, in front of my neighbors, in front of the whole world. The secret of Peter Parker was torn away under the glaring sun. I was on my knees, Sandman's fist raised for the final blow, when a gunshot rang out. Not a loud report, but a sharp, decisive crack. Sandman's form exploded into a shower of harmless dust. I looked. Aunt May stood on our porch, Uncle Ben's old police revolver smoking in her hands, her face pale but utterly determined. She had shot a supervillain to save me. The moment of shock was shattered by a roar of pure fire. Norman descended, a being of wrath and solar heat, having absorbed Johnny Storm's power. He was no longer a goblin, he was a demon. He threw fireballs that melted the street. "Today is your reckoning," he bellowed. I was out of moves, out of strength, out of hope. I thought of Ben. I thought of my parents. I had tried. I had really tried. Then a roaring engine, a speeding truck plowed through the intersection and slammed into Norman Osborn with a sound of crushing metal. The driver's door opened. Mary Jane Watson climbed out, her eyes fierce with tears and triumph. She had stolen a truck. She had run him down. The love and terror I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I got her to safety, then turned to face the monster one last time. He crawled from the wreckage, broken but burning. "I am going to destroy you and your family." Something in me snapped, not into rage, but into a final, cold clarity. This ended here, now. No more threats, no more shadows over my family. I lifted the wrecked truck with a groan of straining metal and flesh. I brought it down on him, again and again. "Shut up!" I screamed, each impact a punctuation to a sentence of pain that had lasted years. With the last of my strength, I brought the wreckage down a final time. There was a flash, a silent, expansive heat and light, and then nothing. Norman Osborn was gone, reduced to ashes on the wind. The fire was out. I collapsed. The pain was everywhere, deep and final. My friends gathered. Aunt May ran to me, her hands on my face. Mary Jane was sobbing, holding me. I could feel it. The great, tired machinery of my body was shutting down. The price for peace had come due. I looked at Aunt May, her face blurring. "I did it," I whispered, my voice a faint thing. "It's okay." I remembered Uncle Ben's smile. I remembered my father's eyes in the old film. I had been responsible. I had saved them. "I saved you," I breathed to May, the world fading at the edges into a warm, soft light. My hand, which had held up buildings and struck down giants, went limp in hers. The last thing I heard was not the sirens, or the cries, or the chaos of a world saved. It was the sound of my family weeping for me. And in the strange, quiet space that followed, I felt no pain, only a gentle hand on my shoulder and a familiar, beloved voice I had longed for my whole life. "You did good, Peter. You did real good."
There is a moment between the last heartbeat and whatever comes next that stretches into an eternity. I floated in that silence, wrapped in a warmth that felt like coming home. Uncle Ben stood beside me, not as a memory, but as a presence, solid and real. We watched the scene below, the grief, the devastation, the end of Peter Parker. "Is it over?" I asked, my voice strange to my own ears. "For you," Ben said, his eyes full of a love so profound it ached. "The fight is finished. You carried the weight. You paid the price. Now rest." And I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to. To let go, to be free of the responsibility, the pain, the endless, exhausting calculus of power and consequence. But then I saw her face. Mary Jane, her spirit shattered, clinging to my lifeless body as if she could pour her own life into mine. I saw Aunt May, the strongest woman I knew, crumbling under a loss too great to bear. I saw the city, my city, shrouded in a genuine mourning for its fallen guardian. The cost of my rest was written in their tears. A strange pull tugged at my core. It wasn't the sting of the spider. It wasn't the whisper of the symbiote. It was something deeper, woven into the very DNA of who I was, a responsibility that not even death could cancel. "I can't," I whispered to the warmth, to Ben. "They're not safe yet. The job isn't done." Ben's smile was sad, understanding, and infinitely proud. "I know," he said, and he gave my shoulder a final, firm squeeze. "Then go." The warmth receded. The silent peace shattered into a cacophony of sensation. Cold pavement against my skin, the metallic taste of blood, a crushing pressure on my chest, and a distant, muffled sound of someone screaming my name. I drew in a breath. It was a ragged, painful, glorious gulp of air. My eyes fluttered open. The world was a blur of tears and flashing lights. Mary Jane's gasp was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I wasn't gone. I was here. Broken, probably dying for real this time, but here. The aftermath was a haze of surgeries, painkillers, and hushed voices. The world celebrated the return of Spider-Man from the brink. But in a quiet hospital room, Nick Fury, the real one, not the bureaucrat who replaced him, came to see me. His one eye held a respect that hadn't been there before. "You died, Parker," he stated flatly. "Clinically, for 2 minutes, your heart stopped, and then it started again. The Oz formula, the spider's bite, it rewrote you on a cellular level. You have a healing factor you never even knew about." He wasn't congratulating me. He was stating a fact. My death was a data point. My return was a tactical assessment. "The world thinks you're a miracle," he said, turning to leave. "Just remember,
Miracles make bigger targets. He was right. My survival didn't end the war. It changed the battlefield. With Norman gone, the shadows didn't vanish. They reshaped. Octo Octavius, ever the survivor, cut a deal with agencies afraid of fury. He was back in a lab, this time with government approval, continuing his work. The Gwen Stacy clone, Carnage, was still out there, a piece of my haunted legacy roaming free. And somewhere in the world, other powers were rising, watching, learning from the story of the boy who fought an army and came back from the dead. I was released home to a life that could never be normal. May made me soup and fussed over my bandages, but her eyes now held the knowledge of what I truly did in the nights. Mary Jane held my hand, but her grip was fiercer, as if afraid I'd slip away again. I stood at my window one evening, looking out at the city I had died for. The weight of Ben's words had never been heavier. With great power. My power had grown. It had evolved. I had faced death and told it not today. And as I watched the sunset paint the skyscrapers in hues of fire and gold, I understood the final, unspoken part of the lesson. With great power comes great responsibility, and with a second chance comes the greatest responsibility of all.
The final battle with Norman Osborn left scars that didn't show on an X-ray. The world saw victory. I felt the cost in the quiet moments. The tremor in Aunt May's hands when a car backfired. The way Mary Jane would wake from a nightmare and reach for me in the dark. The hollow silence where Harry Osborn's friendship used to be. I was Spider-Man. That was the immutable truth of my life. But the boy who had been bitten, who had learned the lesson too late, was gone. In his place was a man who understood that the mask wasn't a disguise from the world, but a promise to it. The threats didn't stop. They evolved. A new, ruthless cartel using advanced tech, a lost experiment from Oscorp's early days, a haunted soldier from a war no one remembered. I faced them all, not with the reckless anger of a teenager, but with the focused determination of a guardian. I trained harder. I planned. I worked, sometimes reluctantly with others, with the Fantastic Four when dimensions bled, with the remnants of S.H.I.E.L.D. when the threat was too big for one neighborhood. I even found a fragile piece with the legacy of my father. In a vault at the Baxter Building, sealed under Reed Richards' care, was the last sample of the Venom symbiote. Not a weapon, not a cure, a monument, a warning of good intentions gone monstrously wrong. I would visit it sometimes, not with Eddie's hunger or Norman's greed, but with a somber respect. This too was my responsibility, to remember, to ensure it was never misused again. One autumn evening, I found myself on the Brooklyn Bridge, not fighting, just watching. The city pulsed below, a living organism of light and sound and struggle. Mary Jane stood beside me, her head on my shoulder. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. She knew the weight I carried. She had chosen to shoulder some of it with me. That was her power and her responsibility. Aunt May had turned our home into a sanctuary, not just for me, but for others lost in the chaos of this new superheroic age. It was her way of fighting. And me? I looked at the skyline, at the millions of lives playing out in the windows. I thought of Uncle Ben. I thought of my parents. I thought of Gwen Stacy, of Harry, of all the faces, friend and foe, that had shaped this path. The great power wasn't just the strength in my limbs, the stickiness in my fingertips, or the sense that warned me of danger. The great power was the love that had saved me. May's, Mary Jane's, Ben's. It was the friendship that had broken me, and the forgiveness that had begun to heal me. It was the legacy of brilliance and failure that was my birthright. It was this city, with all its beauty and its brutality. It was the unshakable, terrifying, wonderful truth that I could make a difference. A police scanner crackled to life in my ear. A disturbance downtown, not a world-ending crisis, a bank alarm, a scared hostage, a problem. I kissed Mary Jane. I'll be back for dinner. She smiled, that fearless, breathtaking smile. You'd better be. I pulled the mask from my pocket. The fabric was familiar, worn, a second skin that held the ghost of every punch thrown, every life saved, every loss mourned. I didn't put it on to hide, I put it on to become. The promise, the guardian, the hero. I leaped from the railing, the wind rushing past, the city opening up beneath me. For a moment, I was flying. Then I fired a webline, felt the familiar, thrilling jolt of momentum, and swung into the heart of the city. My city. The adventure never ends, the responsibility never lifts, but you don't carry it for the reward. You carry it because it's yours. Because with the great power of this life, this love, this second chance, there is only one thing to do. You swing, you fight, you save. You be Spider-Man.